confusion about the main screen is I'm going to show the relationship between reducing dropout rates, that is reducing attrition, and increasing human presence. And so we're going to see that. I just wanted to know, this just in from our institutional research department, that as of summer 2010 at Santa Barbara City College, our completion rate for fully online classes is 87%. And that's compared with 92% for face-to-face, so it's only a 5% difference now. And our success rate, success being defined as completed with or C or better, is at 72% as compared with 83% for fully face-to-face classes. So we're getting there. We're real close. So don't let anybody tell you that distance education is the correlation to classroom-based instruction. It ain't, and we're going to explore that now. So let's go on. Let's go to the next slide. And we're going to talk about the affective aspects of learning. Because think about it. You as a learner, and this is my greetings from Santa Barbara City College slide. If anybody knows who this artist is, go ahead and write me back. But it's sometimes like that here, especially while we were waiting for our budget. But what I wanted to ask you was think for a minute about how you learn things. And I want to ask you if you learn to do something special, like play the guitar, play an instrument, or do something where you kind of taught yourself. And yet it might have been great to have somebody give you a couple of pointers, like a mentor, which is a great function for a faculty member to be a mentor. So there is something inherent about us that we like to learn. We're almost designed or wired to learn, and yet at the same time, the guidance from our peers and from whoever is teaching us is helpful, and that's the human presence. That's the fact that we're social learners. So, advancing to the next slide, just waiting for the system to catch up with me. When I think about all this new technology that's coming out, from Wii's to Xboxes to iPhone 4s, I guess my test for new technology is, does it set people apart or does it bring people together? And if we're talking about distance education, people need to feel that they're together. And so that's what's important when we look at new technologies for distance education. And so if you look at the 2007 Sloan report, they predicted that we would have 6.7 million U.S. students online by 2010. And we've actually already exceeded that. So when you think about that growth, that's a 9.7% growth from the previous year that compares with 1.5% growth for standard, that is, traditional education, classroom-based education. Obviously, distance education is growing by leaps and bounds. You already know that. And now I know that I need to put the slide a little earlier. So when we look at the California community colleges, look at this. There's been an 808% increase in DE courses since 95, 96. What that turns out to be is a sustained 23% rise over the 11-year period. That is year on and year out. Imagine if you could get that in the stock market. Trust me, if you put $100,000 in the stock market at 23%, for that same 11 years, you'd be a millionaire after the 11 years just on that. So I think, I don't know about the interest rate in the market, but I think the interest in distance education is very high. So here at the community colleges, there's a huge interest in this, and the question is why? By the way, this graph begins to show you that rise in distance education, and that looks a lot to me like an exponential curve. So the question then is, why are students so predominantly taking distance ed? I think you know some of that, but some of it has to do with the fact that they expect that a distance ed course is going to be rife with technology. And that's what they like. They live with technology in their lives. So they expect that when they take a distance ed course, it's going to be the same for them. Look at this. 75.8% own a laptop. I think it's higher. 98% own at least 2 electronic devices. And there's more in terms of what our students are doing today. So what's very interesting is that by the time they get to college, they've already had an opportunity to be with a learning content management system, or LCMS, and that over 75% of them have had the experience, and over half of them said it was a very positive experience for them. So they don't come to college without some sense of what distance education is about. We're going to talk about what the problem is in a minute. So here's the problem now. 42% of the students who dropped out of their distance education classes said that they didn't like the learning environment. So we have to think that student satisfaction is key to having low rates of attrition. So 10 to 20% higher rates of attrition nationally in distance education classes. So if you see that at your college, you're not alone. But I just mentioned to you that right now our completion rates, which is the opposite of attrition, is at 87% as compared with 92% for our face-to-face classes, which means that we're not 10 to 20% lower anymore. So we must be doing something right, and that's what I want to talk about in a minute. The next problem that we have is low student academic achievement in distance education as compared with classroom-based education. You can see some of the quotes here. What's interesting is, as you get nearer to the present in time, you see people saying things like, unless the technology is used appropriately. So obviously there is some relationship to how and when technology is used, because we've now passed through that time of the triple convergence. If you've read Thomas Friedman and The World is Flat. So what is the main problem then that many researchers feel about distance education, which is the cause for so much student dropout? It's this lack of human presence. And so here's a quote from Bourne, Edwards, and Wong. It's actually almost 10 years old now. And it says it ignores the social aspect of learning. Relationships are either reduced or eliminated. And I think that's important because we've established earlier, and I think you would agree, that learning for us is a social enterprise. So now let's take a look at this image. This is what some distance education courses look like, what many used to look like. It was a pure sort of lecture transcribed into a document, and it was just a lot of cold, impersonal, and alienating words on a page, and that was the end of it. It was like correspondence school. And that's not really the best practice, is it? So that, we believe, can lead to this, the next slide that's coming up. A student really checking out, and we don't want that. So the question is, how do we ameliorate that? And how do we increase our success rates and our completion rates and reduce our dropout rates? So let's talk about human presence. Social presence, which was the word coined before that, and you can see some of these quotes go way back. Affiliation versus a sense of disconnectedness and social isolation. The image here is what we don't want our students to feel like. It's on the last bus stop before oblivion. And there's absolutely no reason for a distance education student to be made to feel like a second-class citizen. So what is human presence? Well, you see some definitions here. I really like Picciano's, the sense of being in a place and belonging to a group. But one of my favorites is this, the illusion of non-mediation. Not merely because it trips off the tongue like an iambic pentameter, but what does it mean? It sounds to me like the suspension of disbelief. I guess two wrongs do make a right. Kind of double negative. But what we're trying to say here is that you can create an environment in which students don't feel that there's a medium anymore. They really feel like they're there. And that's what the goal is. And I mean that we don't need to go to Second Life to get there. So, academic success, they say that interaction is the sine qua non for quality in distance education. So we need to build in more interaction. And how do we do that? Now, many of you are doing that in your ways. I want to tell you a little bit about the demographics of our students. And you're going to see two charts here, traditional and human presence. And what I think you'll notice is they're actually very similar. What I did in my study was I separated the two groups based on what learning environment they were in. And you can see that our average student was 30 to 49 years old. So they're a little bit different than your average college student. The predominant gender being female. For the slide. And the predominant ethnicity to be white, non-Hispanic. But you can see it's closely followed by Hispanic and many other ethnicities. So our demographics look a lot like the college demographics, except we have a slightly older population. Now, interestingly, 5% reported a learning disability. And you'll see in a minute that an almost equal number reported a physical disability. So that may be a reason why, one of the reasons why they're choosing distance ed, not simply because of time and place convenience and the fact that they work. So this is interesting. Many of our students reported that they spend 5 hours a week preparing for each of their online classes. Well, all your students, find out if that's the case at your school. But what we found is they spend more time preparing for their distance education classes than for their classroom-based exercises. And we think the reason is less time commuting means more time on task. Well, now, interestingly, also with our survey, we found that students wanted more interactive tools, more video and motion graphics. They wanted less written text. They wanted more interaction with their classmates and their instructor, and et cetera. So you can see that this rich media is something that students want. The question is, that we're going to get to, how do you do it? Well, here you see that graph showing that most of our students work 40 or more hours a week. So that's probably a good key as to why they're taking distance education classes. Well, in a study that I did in 2009, when we compared human presence with traditional learning environments, I'm going to define and show you what this human presence is in a little while, we saw a 9.3% difference in student satisfaction. That is statistically very significant. In other words, students were much more satisfied with their human presence online classes. Similarly, we saw a 5.1% difference in class completion rates. Well, you know, if you can move your class completion rates by 5%, that's a lot. And I think equally as important is what we saw in terms of student success. A 9.4% difference in academic success between traditional and human presence. In other words, students who were in human presence classes obviously did almost 10% better than they did in the traditional classes. Well, that's a huge difference. And using linear regression, we then plotted a line, and what we found with the best fit is that everything relates. If you use linear regression analysis, everything correlates back to student satisfaction. So it's not that we're trying to make infotainment here. It's not that we're trying to engage them through being stand-up comics, but rather provide an environment where students feel engaged and they feel that they can be part of the learning. So this new learning paradigm is about creating engagement through interaction by developing a sense of human presence, which leads to higher levels of student satisfaction, which, as you can see in the study that I just showed you, can lead to higher class completion rates and higher levels of academic success. That's the goal. That's the Grail quest. And that, for us, is that missing link to distance education. So our new distance learning paradigm is to take the distance out of distance education through human presence design, to try to bridge that gap somehow that was heretofore felt in distance ed. How do we do it? Well, if you are going to create a distance education learning environment, you need something that you can work with. And if you're working with a proprietary system, you know you can't. So we migrated at Santa Barbara City College from the Blackboard Learning Management System, which is a closed source system, a proprietary system, to Moodle, to open source. And here's the OSI, the Open Source Initiative, talking about why you might want to go to open source. And that's a huge topic, and I wish we could talk at length about it. But the point is, if you want to build a shed, you need some wood. And that's what open source does here. It gives you the tools that you can work with and the resources. So here's some examples of open source, Linux, Apache, which is the engine for so much transaction on the internet. Mozilla Firefox is open source, and here are some proprietary systems. And you can see that the world in the 21st century is moving more towards, at least in my opinion, moving more towards an open environment where you have a sort of Web 2.0 sense where everybody generates content, everybody is involved. So now you need to take open source and you need to connect it with an LCMS, or a learning content management system. What is a learning content management system? You see the definition here. And what's very interesting is that, according to EDUCAUSE, 90% of campuses support at least one CMS. 70% are standardized on one commercial single CMS in the United States, and I ask you to think of which one that is. And then the question is, can we do better? What are the things that are preventing us from doing what we want with these closed systems? So working with an open source LCMS with Moodle, you're probably familiar with Moodle, Modular Object-Oriented Dynamic Learning Environment, and it was first released in '99 under the GNU, that's an IntelliGPL, General Public License, meaning open source. And these are the things that it's built on: constructivism, constructionism, separate and connected, you name it. And interestingly, I don't know if you know this, but this was created by Martin Duguiamas as a PhD thesis in Moodle, his first Moodle shell that he created, and he's never finished the thesis because Moodle just took off. We're going to look at just how it's taken off in a minute. So this is a graph representing this exponential rise of Moodle, which, by the way, reminds me of the exponential rise of distance education. This is worldwide. And look at the number of users, countries, languages, sites, teachers, courses, you name it. It's really growing like gangbusters. One of the reasons that you may not see it as much in the United States has more to do with how our commercial system works here. But you do see it here, and it is becoming more and more prevalent. And interestingly, Moodle and open source is one of the things that the proprietary systems really are not allowed to try to go after legally. So once you have an open source system, and you have something that you can work with, as you can customize, how do you want to customize it? Well, through Web 2.0, and here's a template of Web 2.0 with all the kinds of terms you're quite familiar with at this point. But those are the concepts that we want to build into it. We want to build in this ability for user participation and customization. So when people think about Web 2.0, they often are, maybe they have a cloudy idea, no pun intended, so it's a little bit easier to think of who's doing Web 2.0 kinds of things. YouTube, Wikipedia, Pandora. I listen to music on Pandora a lot. So it's bothered me lately that it's now Pandora free and Pandora for charge. Twitter, Facebook, Flickr, Skype. I'm a big Skype user. WordPress, Delicious, Gmail, you name it. There's a lot of Web 2.0 out there, and the point is that many of our students are using that in the rest of their lives. So do we want to fight it, or do we want to join it? And what does joining it mean? Does it mean that we can find ways to use some of these Web 2.0 processes and techniques to improve learning outcomes in online classes? So then it takes us to this next subject, something called Pedagogy 2.0, which is the leveraging of Web 2.0 into teaching. And interestingly, John Seely Brown, whom some of you may be familiar with, said that it's not going to be the big companies, it's going to be the entrepreneurs, the garage band people, if you will, who are going to really make this transformative phenomenon happen. And in a little while, we're going to see what we've done at SBCC. So what are the things that we think students want based on surveys from students? And that's streaming media, voice over internet protocol, voice boards, desktop sharing, uploadable identities, photos and avatars, presence indicators, something that tells people who's online when they're online, blogs and microblogs, embedded student services, because the student services are about as important to the students as what they're learning when they need a service, like technical support, interactive assessments, rating systems, you name it. So we're going to talk about how we've done that in just a little while. This is an image, a screen capture of the human presence learning environment. And I want to sort of go over the North 40 with you, if I may. So just looking at this right here in the center, let's say that this was week 3. And a student logs into their Moodle shell on this week 3 and they click on it. Immediately, many of our faculty now have welcome messages. And they say, hello and welcome back. It's week 3. Last week we did this. Next week we're going there. So this week we're going to focus on this. And then our instructors sometimes put other videos up. Let me give you a brief discussion about what we're going to be focusing on today. These videos are tremendously impactful for students because they get to see the whites of your eyes. They get to see these nuances. If you're watching me on camera now, you can learn a lot about me, not by what I'm saying, but by my mannerisms. And so they learn a lot about their instructor. And the fact is that Live and AMR instructors are important because we react to them. So another thing along those lines, even though our classes are primarily asynchronous, we do feel that faculty who teach online classes should have office hours, and therefore we have a integrated Skype. So it tells you at what time the faculty member is available, and if you just click on this, it opens up a Skype window, and you can actually dial your instructor and talk to them live. And if you have a webcam and they have a webcam, you can see each other. And, you know, I don't have to tell you how important it is to be able to have live, synchronous conversations, even if you're at a distance, and be able to see the whites of each other's eyes. Hear each other's voices. It's huge. Down here, we have this online users block, which is our presence indicator. So let's have a student, and it's Tuesday at 2 in the morning, and I'm working away at my homework, and I'm having a problem. And I can see in my online users block, my presence indicator, that there are 5 other students there at the same time. It's not unlikely. I can then use that same Skype, if I want, to communicate with other students. And everybody has the option to say whether they're available or not available on Skype. So everybody is tied in that way. You can also chat people. You can also email them, because one of the things that Moodle does is it creates a profile, and you just go right to the profile, and that information is there. So in other words, some of the same kinds of things that can happen live in a classroom can happen in this online learning environment classroom. This is a learning environment, by the way, that we developed on top of Moodle Engine using core worldwide Moodle programmers, and we're specifically now working with Remote Learner. What we've also done is we've embedded our student services in this block. I hope you can see that. So again, as an example, if the students scroll down and they needed technical support, they could just scroll down to technical support, and there might be several things. You can call us at this number, you can Skype us, you can text us, you can chat us, you can send us an email. There are so many different ways that you can interact either synchronously or asynchronously to get your technical question answered any time of the day or night. And that's really important for students, that we're there for them when they're there and where they're there. And I think you know that it was Vygotsky who talked about the importance of being at the point where students are learning. So down here, of course, is an area like a text area for faculty who want to put their lecture information or any other information, so that's always front and center. Moving on to some of the other tools, we have Elluminate Live here. Elluminate Live is actually what we're using right now with CCC Confirm. So this works in 2 ways. Elluminate Live can work just as we are now, synchronously, where we can interact synchronously. If you have a camera, I can see you. You know, you can raise your hand, you can chat, we can do all of that stuff live. What's very nice about it, and I believe that CCC Convert is doing this right now, this Elluminate session can be recorded and archived. And so what many of our instructors do is they say, okay, at 2 times during the week, I'm going to have a live Elluminate session in which I'm going to show you this. And for those of you that can't make one of them, don't worry. They're going to be actually rolled up and embedded into my Moodle shell afterwards so you can catch it later. So Elluminate Live is a really great tool to add to it. And of course, it's my favorite cost, which is free. Thanks to our friends at CCC Confirm, the Chancellor's Office. Another thing that we tied in, so all of this is customization to Moodle. For those of you that use Moodle, it probably doesn't look like your standard Moodle shell. This is our human presence learning environment. We incorporated Windows Voice for it. So what that means is that discussion thread that we've seen where maybe the faculty member will post a question or a concept and then you have to reply to it and students reply to you, et cetera, and it goes on like that. In the thread, all of this is done by voice now. So you click on a button, you record your voice. Now people have said to me, well, it seems kind of strange. I've never heard of an asynchronous voice conversation. My answer to that is, I guess you've never played phone tag, because people leave voicemail all the time. And some people, that's how I communicate with them exclusively. It works. Students love it. They love the fact that they can see each other's faces, their little avatar, whether it's their photo or an avatar that they've posted. They can see the text, but they can also hear what's being said. Down beneath that is, of course, microblog. And, that has a big fancy name, but you know what that is? That's a Twitter feed for the course, so that you can set up a Twitter feed for your course, and students who don't opt into the Twitter feed, all of that information goes directly to the course. So if you say, hey, students, don't forget, tomorrow we're having a quiz, that goes to the little, just-in-time announcements, the microblog. Now, of course, if a student chooses to follow you on Twitter for your class, then they can choose to get that to their email, to get that to their phone, to text, you name it, or to tweet. So the microblog is good. And I think just one other thing I wanted to point out here is this Rate This module, which is a kind of an interesting tool. I'm sure you've seen modular rating tools. They're called recommendation engines on things like Amazon.com. Well, this is an interesting tool. What a student sees is just all open stars. They don't see any previous ratings. And after that week or that module, they can say, you know what, I really like this module. It was a 4-star or a 5-star. They can click on it. It holds their vote, if you will. And then they can write in here, hey, this module is really good. I liked it because of, all the videos you posted or whatever. And then all of this information gets aggregated. So the vote is aggregated so that a faculty member who chooses to use these, notice these are all widgets. So you can use them, you can move them, you can X them out. This is just an environment that we deliver to faculty that they can then further customize. But if they use this gives them anonymous feedback as to how their students like that module. It helps them build the modules better next time. Maybe change things or maybe stay the same because the students love them. But the important point is that each student can make a vote, the vote is aggregated, and then they can make a comment if they want, and that comment is anonymous. So you'll get a series of comments at the end of the week. So those are some of the tools. We have a lot more, but I just wanted to give you a rough idea of some of the interactive tools that we have in our human presence learning environment that has really increased our class completion rates, and it's increased our student success dramatically. And I know that the American Graduation Initiative didn't go as far as many of us had wanted to, but back in July of 2009, President Obama did talk about us creating a new virtual infrastructure. And you know how much importance he's attached to the community colleges for the economic recovery and for what we do for the community. But he also has recognized the online nature of learning now. And he said, we call for a new online open source clearinghouse. And I'm not talking about, this MIT open source project, but rather doing more things with open source online to provide students with more access and more tools. I have actually presented this to the Department of Education in Washington a couple of times, and they're pretty excited about what we're doing here, especially since now the results seem to be bearing that out. But we now have, if I can find the watch, about 12:30. I'm going to try to move through pretty quickly so that I could get through some questions. And this is where I say, I'm done lecturing, because it should never have been a lecture in the first place. And that's how you can get in touch with me. There's my email address and my Skype address, and maybe we can open it up to some questions now. Donna, how would we do that?
Let's see. You know what? I've got some, actually in the chat area, we've got some great comments and questions. So let me just give you a couple of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we've got Esther. Early on, she was asking about the difference between traditional and human presence. I'm not sure if you want to review that or...
Yes, and I apologize if I didn't make that very clear at the beginning. We think of a traditional or standard course as being one with static text and graphics. So that's where, you have a course that's primarily a text-based course that maybe has a couple of images in it, some graphic images, but it's static. And our human presence courses are very much like what you saw there with that human presence learning environment with all of these tools. So what I had done in 2009 is I took an equal number of classes which were across the board in different disciplines, and I compared them according to those factors being student satisfaction, class completion rates, and academic success. And the statistics that I showed you of increased student satisfaction, increased class completion rates, that is the opposite of increased attrition. And in other words, we had decreased attrition. And of course, academic success. Those are the really key factors that probably you care about, but also the people above you and the people above them, and all the way up to heaven, I guess, care about. And so we've been able to show with actual statistics from our institutional research that year on and year after year now, our success rates are dramatically improving. And we think a lot of this has to do with our transition from a proprietary closed source system to building this human presence system and making it available for faculty to use so that they can use anything from standard vanilla 1.9.2 or wherever, we're almost at Moodle 2.0 now, anywhere from that to our full human presence module. I hope that answers your question.
Let's see. Jeannie was wondering if she can get a copy of the PowerPoint, and I did say we are going to be sending out an email at the, you'll probably get it tomorrow. We'll send a copy of the archive, a link to that, and a link to your PowerPoint.
Do that. Yeah.
Okay.
It may not be outside of the link here. If anybody emails me and they want a PowerPoint, I'd be very happy to send you the PowerPoint. I'll be probably presenting something similar to this at DESHI coming up in San Diego. I think it's December 2nd, and a couple of other places. But if you want me to do a webinar for your school or come, that could be interesting. Could be fun.
Yeah. Deanna wanted to know, does open source mean free? What's the definition of that?
That is an excellent question, Deanna. Open source means free of licensing costs. So I want to make a very clear comparison, and I'm not trying to insult anybody when I do. When we were working with Blackboard, honestly, I've already established that we basically got what they gave us, and we weren't able to customize it. And there were many things that we wanted to be able to do that we couldn't do because at that time, maybe they've done so since, at that time Blackboard wasn't really incorporating a lot of these human presence tools. We were paying a lot of money for Blackboard. We were paying, well, in the end we paid almost $208,000 a year for it. And every year, Blackboard said, well, you know, each renewal you can expect a 20% increase in price. Well, when we got our last price increase, at our last renewal, it was a 178% increase. And we expected that that kind of thing would continue to go. So we said, well, wouldn't it be better if we as a college agreed to move away from Blackboard and then reinvest that money that we were formerly spending on licensing and hosting costs on developing Moodle into something really special? And so I would say no, open source is not free. It's free of licensing costs. But that means that you can take the money that you might have spent on licensing costs for a proprietary system and use that for anything from your infrastructure to your teaching. We've spent a lot of money teaching faculty how to use these in different workshops where we've actually paid them and we've given them webcams. And it just seems to us to be a much wiser investment of funds than just spending money on a system that's not quite accomplishing our goals.
Okay, let's see. Thank you. Paul wanted to know how much tech support, meaning bodies, are you needing to support Moodle there?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really good question, too, because our tech support is actually, the way it's structured at the college, we have tech support for faculty and staff through IT, but we also have a student tech support desk. And so our student tech support desk are two bodies. They're live bodies. I know them well. And our help desk is probably at least 5 people on the help desk. Now, here's the rub. All of these services are from basically 8 to 4:30. So what happens in the after-hours time? I think all of us know that many of our students who work, or maybe they take care of their parents, or they have very busy lives. They might be in this course at very strange times. So how do you provide equivalent tech support to these students? One of the ways to do that, as you may be familiar, is that the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office has created a system-wide consortium through Presidium and Parature to provide for essentially help desk service, that's Tier 1 help desk service, that anybody can call into 24/7 and over the weekend as well. So that could fill in those gaps. And I think it's important when you're looking at it 24/7 by almost 365 enterprises that you have a technical service that's equivalent to that. Hope I've answered that question.
Great. Let's see. Mary had said, I've only had 3 to 5 students show up for live office hours, and I've tried lots of different times in 3 separate semesters. Why is it so important?
If the question is, why is it so important to have live office hours, I would say for really 2 reasons. One, as you know, by accreditation standards, you are supposed to provide the same level of pedagogy and the same level of services to your students wherever and whenever they're learning at your campus. And so if you are providing for office hours that are face-to-face, in-person office hours for your traditional classroom-based instruction, then it only makes sense that you would do the same thing for your online instruction. So whether students take advantage of it or not, you want to have that available. Here we're finding that now we've done this for 2 years, and it takes time for students to realize, wow, I can do some of these things online. So I would say give it time, but we're having a lot of students now go online for their face-to-face, in-person, where you can answer a question that you might have found harder by email or by chat, but people are looking at each other. And I just really believe that the dynamics change. Let me tell, actually, I want to tell an anecdote that is a little bit off this, but some years ago, before we were in Human Presence, I had a faculty member come to me and say, look what's happening in my online class. And maybe you've had this happen to you, where one student actually wrote email to all the other students in the class saying, hey, listen, I was partying, I didn't study for the test, the teacher said that I could take the test, at a different time now, and so can you give me the answers? You believe that? So one of the other students in the class who was a working adult wrote him back and said, I'm not going to give you the answers to the test, but I'd be happy to get on Skype with you and talk you through some of the issues that are important for the test. And the student wrote him back and completely flamed him. I mean, I can't even repeat it because I sound like a drunken sailor. So student number 2, a working adult, wrote him back and said, I'm really stunned that you would write me like that and flame me that I won't give you the answers. I'm willing to help you. I'm willing to work with you. But, I just can't believe, what you would you have really written that to me? Would you have said that to me if we were face-to-face? And sent that as an email to the student. The student replied and flamed him worse. Just completely. So the instructor came to me and said, what do I do about this? I mean, I have one student abusing another student in an online class, and I just don't know. And I said, well, after all, this is in your, this is by email, and it's in the chat. And so that's your classroom. And so you have a student who's obviously a little bit beyond the pale as far as the code of student conduct, and you really should talk to that student about the code of conduct, which the instructor did. The point of this whole story is, I think there's a saying, it's hard to hate someone you know. And it seems to me that the more people have the opportunity to communicate with each other, to get to know each other, the more they can work together, the more they can collaborate online, the more hopefully they'll like each other, and the more satisfaction there is all around.
Okay, thanks. Lawrence wants to know, he says, do we expect part-time faculty who teach online classes to do all of this?
Okay. Well, the reason that I find this a very interesting question is at the beginning, and I will admit, there is a learning curve. And we have workshops, which, as I mentioned, they're usually off-contract workshops, maybe in the summer or the winter breaks or spring breaks, where we actually pay our full-time and our adjunct instructors to take these here at Santa Barbara City College. So we pay them to learn how to do it. And the learning is learning and doing. So at the end of the week, they actually know how to do many of these things that I've just described to you. So there is a learning curve. I certainly won't lie to you about that. But what we found with our instructors is they've had a lot of fun learning it, and they really enjoyed it. Now the next part is, holy cow, you're saying to me I'm going to make a little video, which, by the way, you can do as simply as hitting a button and using your webcam. That's how many of our instructors make videos. Some of our instructors, we, by the way, have we have, I think, 35 of these flood cams that we can check out to faculty if they want to make more complicated videos. And those have been very popular. So is there a lot of work up front? Absolutely. If you want to do this full on, making videos and do all that. But it reduces your workload down the road because now not everything is a one-off. Now when you have a question that comes up commonly in your class, you can make a video on it, upload it to your Moodle shell, embed it as a video embedded in your Moodle shell, and then students can begin to answer their own questions. And what you find is, or at least this is what our faculty have found, they said the activation energy is higher. I had to learn, I had to do work. But once I did it, my maintenance on a daily basis is much lower. My classes are much higher quality, and there's much less work on a day-to-day basis that I have to do. So, yeah, it's a balancing act.
Great. How do deaf students handle WIMBA voice? If I were to go back to a couple of slides, you'll see that the way WIMBA voice works for us is that you have the voice, but you also have the text. And so you have both. So there's no problem from a universal design point of view. We've been really careful to pay attention to universal design, thanks in part to the folks at DSPS, and in particular, one of our faculty members here, Lori Vasquez, who works at DSPS and keeps us honest. So I'm going to give a shout out to Lori Vasquez and say thank you for helping us make a system that is universally designed. Great. Let's see. What else do we have? We had a couple people you've already answered about the IT support. I know we had quite a few people asking about that. And let's see. We've got, what sort of bandwidth does your college use to support this, the program?
Sure. So that's also a really good question, because if we were back, I started this sort of thing. I was over at UCSD starting in 1994, University of California, San Diego. And at that time, we were trying to do work for clinicians to clinicians at different hospitals, all of which were on T1. So we were able to do all this very high bandwidth stuff, whereas the rest of the world was on 14.4 dial-up. And I'm so very glad that I don't have to hear bong, 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 and all that stuff anymore, because now we're mostly at much higher broadband. The saturation of broadband is, well, of course, except for some very rural areas and underserved areas, broadband is pretty much penetrated. So everything that we do works at typical broadband speeds without any buffering issues. As you know, Skype works very well even at slightly lower bandwidth. So we don't need anything special. We don't need special networking for it. It's all now about compression and compression algorithms and how things can be delivered at broadband or below.
Let's see, we've got a couple questions about as far as, are the Santa Barbara Community College trainings available to us?
I wish they were. I really do. They're given through our Faculty Resource Center for our faculty, and so no, I'm afraid that, and as I said, we pay them. I would love to be able to say, oh, just come and just join us. And maybe that's not an impossibility. I just have to take that up with the folks over here. Usually our classes are full, if not overflow classes. But I would be very glad to give you David Wong and Mark Ferrer's contact information. There are co-directors of the FRC, and there may be a lot of materials that they can point to that you can access online, because they also have a most amazing website with many of the training that we do in person having been videotaped, with a lot of tutorials. They use Camtasia, they use Jing, and I would say most of what we teach our faculty in our workshops, you can learn by going to a lot of the links at our FRC site, our Faculty Resource Center site, or checking with David Wong or Mark Ferrer as to where they can find that particular thing. So I think that's my best answer for now. But if you have a real interest in coming to visit us and learning some of these things, email me and I'll find out. The other thing is, 7 years ago, we had our first SBCC Moodle Summit. And I honestly think it's time for another one where we have a summit where we show what we're doing, where faculty talk about all the really neat things, and faculty come up with different things. We had a faculty member just last week show us how they're using Animoto, which is an amazing tool. There's so many of these Web 2.0 tools out there that you can just bring into Moodle and embed. And maybe it's time for another Moodle SBCC Moodle seminar that focuses on human presence. And if that interests you, maybe email me so I get a sense of how much interest there is, and then I can pitch it to do another one, maybe at a convenient time, maybe early in the spring.
Yeah, it might be something we can help you support through Confer so that people can attend. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. Let's see, Doug, I know we've got like about 9 minutes left. Let's see. Could you, they want you to elaborate on, it's Presidium. That's the 24/7 service. That's through the Chancellor's office.
Right, right.
Okay.
So you, if the question is to elaborate about Presidium, Presidium and Parature are two private enterprises that offer technical support for a variety of systems, and they work in tandem through this Chancellor's Office grant for a consortium. And so what's good about this is they now give us, as City Colleges, special pricing. So if you go through the Chancellor's Office for the consortium, then you get much cheaper, because what they've done is they've aggregated all of the responses, so that instead of, if we were to have, say, classified staff members just answering calls, how many calls would we get at, Tuesday at 2 in the morning? But since they're doing it system-wide, so potentially 112, they may get 20 or 200. So it becomes now cost-effective for them, and that's how they're able to reduce their price and make it cost-effective for us. So that we really can say that, that is, colleges that use it really can say that they're offering 24/7 support. One note of caution, I've actually seen some comments in the blog here that some people have not had a great experience with Presidium. That's interesting and new information. That's certainly not anything that I've heard, but I believe it, if that's been your experience. The note of caution is this. We've had some difficulty here instituting this Chancellor's Office consortium for Presidium and Parature, because our CSEA, our Classified Staff Union, is concerned that it is the outsourcing of work that could be done with classified staff. And yet Presidium does operate at colleges that have a very active CSEA. And so it's really a question, if you have a CSEA at your school, you really want to sit down with the rest and hash it out, because it can be used for after-hours support, and it's not about outsourcing the work of classified staff members.
Yeah. You know what, maybe we can get the contact and information and send that out as part of the follow-up email to your webinar.
Right. I mean, the reality is, what choices do we have? If you have distance education at your college, can you provide tech support night and weekends? When you think about that, if you're going to do night, and your help desk closes like ours at, say, 4:30, and you've got the 4 to midnight shift, and you've got, that graveyard shift from midnight to 8 a.m., before they get back in. That's 2 shifts. That's 2 different people. And then on the weekends, you have 3 shifts. So how many people will you have to hire to cover how many students? And then there's the question of classified staff working unsupervised. So it is an important issue and one that our accreditors are expecting us to answer. We are required to provide equivalent services to our online students as those that we provide for our campus-based students. So it's something that each college has to grapple with and figure out for themselves.
Let's see. I have a couple questions or comments in regards to, it looks like closed captioning. Do you use Dragon to create the video modules? Are the faculty videos captioned? Those were 2 comments, questions.
Good question. Universal design requires captioning or transcripting. And so our faculty do either one. They either provide a transcript or they do captioning. Captioning is done in one of several ways. The predominant way that we do this here is, as you are probably aware, there's also a captioning grant at the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. And it's a very big grant. I think it comes out of Butte College there's quite a bit of money there, and you don't have to put any money out. So if you ask for money as part of this grant and you give a pretty good rationale for how much money you need and why you need it, chances are you're going to get the money. And then this means that your faculty members can say, okay, I've got 30 videos that I want to caption. And whoever is handling it at your campus basically takes those videos, sends them to the vendor that's been pre-approved, and the vendor does the work and then charges it to the grant. So there's no financial outlay required for the college. There are many, many other ways to do captioning. Transcription, of course, is easy. You have a transcript of some of these are scripted to begin with, so you have a transcript and you just upload that. But another example of how to do captioning, sometimes I do this when I upload things to YouTube, is you can use products like CaptionTube. And if you've never tried CaptionTube, basically you open up their site and you connect the URL of where your YouTube video is, and it brings that YouTube video in, and then it gives you an interface where you can stop and start it, and then you can play a little bit, and then you can type in the caption for that section and hit the go button so that the captions really fall in all the right places. I've had a lot of success with using CaptionTube.
Yeah, it looks like we have some other people have as well. Let me just, how about 2 more comments here? I've got, let's see here. I've got one comment. I'm sure some of the human present technology, as in making yourself accessible or accessible are in different ways is intuitive, as in what feels right for your style of teaching. We already do a discussion board. We're available on email daily, at least 3 or 4 times a day. Is it true, too, that many students want to take as little time as possible to do their work? I'm going to email my students a brief questionnaire and see what they say, what works for them and what more they would like. My experience is that the fewer bells and whistles and a personal teaching style helps in keeping this active and dynamic. We also find that people drop for various reasons, life changes, event situations, finding that online is just not for them is one of them.
Well, I couldn't agree more with that. You know, there are no faculty members should feel that they are to be held accountable for attrition. And yet the reality out there is if you haven't been asked about what your attrition rates are, you're going to be. And we hear it not only from the senior administration, but they're under pressure from the people above them. And it's one of those bottom line things that people seem to care about, what's your attrition rate. And so what we learned when we did a survey of students, what do you want, what are you not getting, what do you want more, what do you want less of, how do you want to design a system that works for you. This is the direction that we took, which was creating more personal interaction, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous. We do a survey every spring called our Online College Student Experiences Survey, and from that we then customize, and this is what we learned. I understand your point about the fewer bells and whistles, and we just went in a different direction. It's not so much about having all these sort of sizzle in the state. It's about creating a system whereby if students want to talk with other students, live or asynchronously or just chat them up. We want to be able to create an environment in which they can do that. If students want to have connections to their faculty members online, we want to be able to provide that for them. If they want to be more anonymous and don't want, they don't have to use it. But we have students who have an interest in it and who use it. And we have enough data to suggest that at least here at Santa Barbara City College, it improves all of our key metrics, that we're continuing to go in that direction and it seems to work. As I said before, there is a little bit of learning involved, but what I've found is that most of our faculty members were really excited about learning this stuff because they feel more than anyone this need for social presence, for human presence, and they're jumping at it. And then they take the training, and then they start teaching us stuff like, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried Shing? Have you tried Camtasia? Hey, I'm using Animoto now. Hey, and it's just, wow, it's just kind of gone crazy here. And I think that's the way it should be. The faculty create new portals to learning, and then students upload material, and they create new ideas, and it's always going to be changing.